Here's Brody Brazil.
Well, if I'm being honest, in this day of public funding requests by sports teams, this is not necessarily one I had specifically on my bingo card. The St. Louis Cardinals are looking to do some upgrades to Busch Stadium 3. I know a lot of people don't call it that or realize it as that, but yes, this is the third iteration of Busch Stadium. It's not that old. It looks beautiful. I've been there in recent years. It was done quite well. It was done right next to the old Busch Stadium. It's right downtown. There's a lot of momentum. You kind of can't even understand what type of renovations they'll actually be doing. There's nothing surface level that actually looks like it needs it. Let's first dive into a little bit of the background on Busch Stadium. This one opened in April of 2006. Back then, I say it only cost $365 million. That really showcases inflation across the last, 18, 20 years. Nowadays, things are one point something, $2 billion, $365 million for the entire construction seems like a bargain, but again, that is the result of inflation in recent times. Now, back then, they kind of applauded the way this was done. There are some discrepancies here in terms of how much was actually privately financed. The Cardinals say that this stadium was 90% privately financed. Outside sources claim that it's more like 79%, but the bottom line is that you understand to some large degree the construction of this stadium was mostly privately financed. Now, they're about to ask for public money to give it some updates and upgrades. I'll explain that in just a second, but it's a pretty big ballpark. Seats 40, almost 5,000, and that number has gone up and down over time. They've made changes. They've already made upgrades to this ballpark. It hasn't just sat there untouched, obviously, in 18 years. And they've done well as a fan base. Only one normal year. Let me explain that. That's why the asterisk is there. It was 2011, I think. They had an average attendance of 38,000 per game. That's the only year so far where they ever dipped below 40,000 in a single season. Every other year, 43, 42, 41, 44,000. They've done quite well with attendance. 2020, 2021 were the only years, obviously pandemic related, where they had issues. And it's spelled out right here. It's not even really fluctuated greatly. And I know this graph is a little bit difficult to interpret. There's not the exact precise numbers, but above 40,000 all the time. You can see that one dip right there between 2010 and 12. That's 11 where they were, I think, 38,000 on average. So if you're judging the stadium and the success of the team in terms of success of attendance, there doesn't seem to be much wrong right now in St. Louis. Now, I also understand you want to be proactive. You want to stay ahead of the curve. You want to make sure that your stadium is always viable. But this was really interesting. On opening day, there was a press release from Greater St. Louis Incorporated and Explore St. Louis, right? Like tourism agencies and downtown business agencies trying to make sure that business and opportunity still goes well in downtown St. Louis. From March 28th, here's what the press release says. Again, this is a release to the press, not a release by the press. Greater St. Louis Incorporated and Explore St. Louis today released an analysis estimating the Cardinals will generate more than $310 million in economic impact for the St. Louis metro area during the 2024 season. The organizations released the annual report prior to the 2024 home opener versus the Miami Marlins at Busch Stadium. The release continues with a direct quote from the mayor saying this: "I'm looking forward to celebrating opening day in St. Louis with the best sports fans in the world," said Mayor Tishara O. Jones. Quote, "Home games are invaluable in supporting our local businesses and helping downtown grow and thrive," end quote. The Cardinals project attendance of 3 million this season. Based on that projection, GSL's analysis found that the team will generate $311.1 million in economic impact in the region. That total amount is comprised of $141.3 million in direct economic impact and $169.8 million in indirect economic impact. And it goes on to describe the difference between direct and indirect. Basically, direct is people actually going to games and the businesses surrounding the stadium and the stadium itself. Indirect is like all the companies that make the hot dogs, that make the soda, that make the beer, that then go to the stadium. So you can see how they've expanded a little bit there on the economic impact. But all that comes out, so you're thinking, well, why would that be important to us? Well, within the next 2 weeks, right, of this baseball season getting underway, public radio in St. Louis and riverfronttimes.com have started to uncover the ask. Why did that come out? What is the team asking for? Why would you bring this up if you weren't asking for something? And the article here, which I'll link to down below, discusses positive momentum, right, in the St. Louis downtown area with Cardinals games, with the ballpark village they built out there a handful of years ago. But it says for the positive momentum to continue, Bill DeWitt III, who is the Cardinals president, yes, in line with the Cardinals ownership, the family of ownership there, says Busch Stadium will need a, quote, significant capital infusion, end quote, in 2 to 5 years. He said it's, quote, too early to detail what the improvements would look like. But he said this, quote, our goal would be to handle whatever back of the house things need to happen and fix them, as well as probably create some cool and interesting new features for the fans. So if I'm just diving in here word for word, back of house stuff, what does that mean to the average fan? Well, not much. It's the things you don't see. It's the kitchens, it's the infrastructure, it's all of the technology that makes the front-facing stuff you see that much better and more efficient. So he's hinting at some things here that mostly sound like infrastructure, mostly sound like buildings and operation stuff, not the actual shiny toys and bells and whistles here. It sounds like most of what needs to happen is not the sexy stuff, if that's a way to describe it, but there's really no description or detail of what we're even talking about here. The article goes on to explain this. The owners would likely seek public money for that, he adds. When asked how much a project would cost, DeWitt III said it would likely be in a similar range to recent Milwaukee Brewers and Baltimore Orioles projects. Those, just so you know, and this is absolutely true, are $500 million in Wisconsin and $600 million in the state of Maryland. Those are taxpayer investments, they're calling it. It's taxpayer money, respectively. And so that's kind of a shock factor right there, that we don't even know the specifics of what exactly is going to happen. Like, what do you get for $500 and $600 million? Again, looking at Busch Stadium, there's not much to it that seemingly is in disrepair. There's also this, like on the other side of the show me state, Missouri, right? This happened in Kansas City, Missouri, where the Chiefs and the Royals just got voted down for their stadium tax to continue in Jackson County. I included a couple headlines here, but this was only about 2 weeks ago. This was April 2nd. A major vote got turned down. And so the Royals and Chiefs are now without their public funding that they were getting annually for years and decades. Now they're not going to have that continue any longer. So in a time where it just happened on the other side of the state that the public voted this down, the Cardinals are hinting that within the next handful of years, they might need some money for something. And that's where I begin on my takeaways here. The timing is interesting. Like, wouldn't you want to read the room a little bit and understand that this just didn't work? I mean, literally in your same state. I understand it's on the other side of the state. Maybe the politics and the scene and the situation are different. I'm not going to pretend to understand Missouri politics, but the timing of the ask, the timing of the mention, it's not even an ask yet, is interesting. There's also no specifics mentioned here. And again, that's a part I'm curious about. What does Busch Stadium not have or not do well right now? I will agree that you want to get ahead of the curve. You want to make it so that your stadium is not a money pit problem in 5 and 10 and 20 years. And yeah, it is approaching, 30 years old, like right around the corner, or 25 years old. Sorry, I didn't do the math, but it's not that old, but it is at that age where it might need some upgrades. There's no attendance issue for right now, so this is not some immediate fix that's needed to make sure fans start coming back. They've got the relatively new ballpark village. That wasn't immediately built with the ballpark. That's something they kind of added down the line. And again, they have made improvements, small improvements here and there, but now the ask is being hinted at $500 to $600 million. It just kind of feels crazy. And yeah, by the way, in the show me state, that's 3 of the 6 pro teams saying, show me the money. The only ones that aren't right now are the St. Louis Blues and the 2 MLS teams in the state of Missouri. But as for the Cardinals, the Royals, and the Chiefs, well, the Royals and the Chiefs just got turned down. They'll still ask for it. But now you've got the St. Louis Cardinals also asking for money. So again, this is not something I just necessarily expected. I mean, teams and stadium entities, they ask for public funding when they're trying to do something new, or it's obvious that they need it, or it's obvious that something is outdated and past its useful life. And I'm not saying they'll get it or not. I'm just saying I see how they try and justify asking for it. In this case, I guess we don't even know what the specifics are, but we don't even know why this would be brought up, especially with the timing how it is. You made it here to the end of the video. You know I appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. That'll greatly help me and this channel. And by the way, if you've never seen me or any of this before, that's awesome. I'm glad you found me. Make sure, though, real quick, before you go, before this video ends, go down there and hit that subscribe button so I can definitely see you back here next time.